And good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the Clallam EDC Coffee Chat, Coffee with Colleen. We're excited to have some real estate professionals with us this morning. We have both my little brother, Michael McAleer from Remax Prime in Sequim, and we have Jim Haguewood, a longtime professional from the Port Angeles area, and they're prepared to talk about, give a real estate update, what they're seeing from a data standpoint in both Sequim and Port Angeles. So with that, if you want to ask any questions, we'd like to make this fairly interactive. So Michael and Jim, I'll be watching the chat and let you know if there's any questions. And if anybody would like to ask a question themselves of the presenters. Oh, and look, there's Kyle Johnson from Africa. Hi, Kyle. So good to see you. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, he's on a mission there in Africa. That's so cool. Welcome. Great to see your smiling face. So if you would like to ask any questions of them, please raise your hand and I'll go ahead and call on you. In the meantime, if you put yourself on mute so we don't inadvertently hear any background noises, dogs barking and the like, I'd appreciate it. And so Michael, take it away. And thank you so much for joining us.
You are so welcome. Hi, everybody. Shout out to my dad. Oh, I see you there, the original Mike McAleer. And thank you, Colleen, for having me. You are one of my favorite sisters. Really appreciate you being here today. And a lot of other friendly faces. So yeah, happy to talk to you today. The most exciting thing is going to be to see whether or not I can share this screen. First, I do want to thank a couple people that helped me put this together. Debbie Swanson from my team, she's amazing. Maureen Pfaff from OPT provided some information to Jim and myself, and Jesse Schubert helped me out from Action Property Management with some information on rentals. So let's see how we do here. How we doing? Is it there?
Yep, sure is. Looks great.
Okay, minor miracle. Okay, so yeah, like I said, thanks for having me. If this is, I'm going to put this to the side so I can see it. So this is just a little background, just on an annual basis, you can see where prices have been. This is the median home price for a home in Sequim. Just a little background, make sure some caveats here. We take this data from the Olympic Listing Service. That is the small MLS that makes up Sequim and Port Angeles Association of Realtors. It's only about 280 realtors, but it makes up for about 85% of the sales in our area. We've been tracking this since about 2004. We use, for these numbers, we have used, since the beginning, we have used homes that are not on leased land. So I'll talk a little bit about that later about homes and parks, but so just so you know, this does not include homes that are in parks on leased land for this data. Here's number of annual home sales. You can see, obviously go back to the recession years of 2008, 9, 10, quite low. We're pretty robust there for a bit, and we've actually fallen off, even though the prices have risen and stayed high and pretty flat the last few years. Our home sales have dropped off the last couple of years, and that is clearly two reasons. One, interest rates, of course, and then low inventory. Here's the quarterly median price, which goes, you can see the trends there as well. 2023 fourth quarter, 545. Here's the number of homes sold per month, just comparing first quarters. So obviously the second quarter data is going to come out here in a few days, but we've fallen off just a bit. Same reasons, interest rates, inventory. And this is comparing number of homes for sale per month. So we like to, when it comes to inventory and sales volume, we like to compare like quarters because we are seasonal. We sell more in the warmer months, less in the winter months. And again, done a little better than 2021 and 22, but still historically low inventory. This one, here's our median sold price. We're kind of getting back with the second highest was in the first quarter compared to 2022 first quarter. 575 was the highest ever. 567 was last quarter. I can tell you, I'll cut to the chase. We're at 569 right now, so it's still pretty high. This is average number of homes for sale per month. So this is more current data. Our inventory still historically low. This is home sales. So this is not complete information because we will get more sales here in the next few days. I know in our office, we've got quite a few here in the next few days. So that number is probably going to match about what the second quarter was of last year or come close to it. So cash sales versus finance sales, that was one of the questions we were asked. So I'll just kind of go through these. Squim in 2020, when we had low rates, about 31% of the people paid cash, with 69% getting bank financing. So Squim in 2023 with higher rates, 41% paid cash. I think that those numbers, the last couple of years now, we're at 42% paid cash so far this year. OPT gave us numbers, Maureen did, that actually were even higher than that from their sampling. They don't make up the entire market, of course, but this is again from the OLS. This is pretty high, and it's higher than the national average, and it's probably higher than Port Angeles. And I think that's just reflective of the fact that Squim has more retirees, and we see more retirees paying cash than younger people. Makes sense. And I don't know if it's intuitive or not, but we actually see more cash sales above the median price than we see below, and we see more finance deals below that median price. We do have so just for something to consider, the current mortgage rate, and depends on where you go on the internet and who you talk to, and I think there's a bunch of different variables, but it's about 7.6% right now, which is high. So the current, monthly payment for a $569,000 home, that is our median. If you put 20% down, which allows you to avoid PMI, that is a monthly payment of $3,645 per month. That's a lot, and a lot of people can't afford that. So our current inventory right now, we've got 176 homes on the market in Squim, and that is that includes our pending sales, 49 pending sales, 124 active. That is a little bit more of a balanced market. There were a few years there during COVID and the year after where we would see that totally reversed, where if we had 176 on the market, we'd have like 125 pending sales and maybe 48 active. So it's there's more choice out there, and we are seeing sellers come down off their prices and negotiating a little bit more. The days on market is grown. There was a while there where it was single digits in terms of the days on market before things sold. We're at 31 days right now for our active and pending sales. Interesting that 67 of the homes on the market right now, that number changed because I did those over 2 days. 67 of the homes have reduced their price. I thought that was pretty interesting. So people will slap crazy prices on there sometimes, and usually reality hits a couple weeks, maybe a month in, and they come down more into more reasonable range. This is from Jesse Schubert. He's traveling, but he put this together for me last night. Appreciate it. Some great property management companies out there. But Jesse is been around. His dad started this company a long time ago. Walt, rest in peace, Walt. Yeah, here's the information that he gave us. So 30 new homes or 30 new rentals that they've signed on since January 1st, 8 from a new job. 8, their rental was sold, and so they needed or the owner was moving in, so they needed to find a new place. 10 just wanted a new a change, be closer to family. Two, moving to Squim to build a home, and then two were Coast Guard. He was just talking about the environment of the rental market, and a lot of times we would see people buying investment properties, and that's a math equation basically. Does it make sense to buy a rental, and in terms of your expenses, is it going to give you a good return? Right now it's not been. So really the property prices and the interest rates are too high for the most part. Rental rates have been flat, which frankly is probably good, because of the incomes around here. The expenses are increasing, just like everything with inflation, insurance, property taxes, HOA fees, appliances, labor, materials. And then the increasing risk for anti-landlord legislation at the state level, that have softened a little bit since COVID, but still make it pretty difficult. The environment can be difficult for an owner. So, he talked about, people that have owned that rental for a long time or bought it outright, they do fine. Obviously, that math completely changes when you don't have to finance it. Interesting that the average rent of his properties are $1,737. And so the industry standard, we required to have your tenant, have an income of 3 times the rent. That means you need an income of $62,532 a year. He's got the median income of in Squim from 2022 of 48,000. I believe that is higher. Colleen, you can speak to that, but still, the wages aren't matching the rent just now. So that is what I've got. Happy to take questions if you've got some. And I'll leave this up if we need to go back to any slides. Happy to do so. And I'm also happy to share this with anybody if you want it.
So yeah, great. Michael, if you'll send that to me or Mitch, really would appreciate that. And we'll post it on our website, clallam.org. So yeah, we at the port meeting yesterday, port commissioners meeting, we had the executive officer of the Coast Guard station join us, and they are looking at potentially locating some cutters, and this is now public information, to Port Angeles. I think we're competing with one other community. And if, a big thing they're considering is housing for their families. There's currently 330 families that are Coast Guard members. And so they know that there's not housing available. Only 5 to 10% of their population are need like a multifamily environment. The rest would be families that need a home or potentially a single family residence. But the cost of the amount of housing allowance that the Coast Guard provides either requires that the family is in a subpar housing environment, or they are having to pay more than that, 30%. So they're looking at potentially building housing. And so that's something that would be part of that discussion. I know that's something Tim has talked about. And so if there's more families that come in, they are looking at potentially housing them by creating their own housing somewhere in the Port Angeles area. So I just thought that was an interesting public conversation that we could share. And of course, with the McKinley announcement, we're going to have a lot of people that are looking for jobs in that space as well. So Timothy Dalton, the 3645 that Michael said was at current interest rates, what does that equate to then for what you would need to be making annually if you're spending 30% on your housing?
You have to be over 200% AMI in order to be affording that. I want to say you're somewhere dual income, and you're going to probably, Michael or Jim can attest that, you're probably somewhere in $175,000 to $200,000 is what you need to be making. I know when with PAs, I think it was 427, and you needed to be about $120,000 a year in order to afford that. But when you start getting up there, that you need to be in a $200,000 a year neighborhood to be able to afford that, to be at 30%.
Yeah.
Gross.
And so a question I've got about that, so the mortgage would be 3,645, and that assumes you put down 20%, Michael, and
Right.
so you're not paying PMI,
Correct.
which is property mortgage insurance, if I remember correctly. It's a long time ago. But what about, does that also include your utilities and insurance?
No.
No. So
Or
that's
taxes.
or taxes. And that 30% figure, that there's the rule of thumb that so you're not house poor, technically house poor. Are you supposed to include the utilities and the insurance? So that 3,645 number would go up?
No, it's just like I say, that 30% number that they're looking at is just the house, not the utilities or anything like that. And really, and the thing about it is that they're looking at that as a gross number and not as a net number.
Yeah.
So that, that's kind of where you get by the time you look at it. And if you're looking at it from a net perspective, that you're up that, 50%. You could be 50, 60% of your income trying to make that 36 number.
So it looks like Steve, once again, has great questions. So I'll assume you don't want to, you'd like me to read it. So I'll go ahead. New housing is coming in Sequim and Carlsberg. It looks like it could be 5 times greater than Port Angeles, despite having roughly half the population. Can you talk about these big projects and what you think are the long-term implications of such a dramatic, I assume, population shift? And then home pricing is up massively and remained high despite rising rates. Do you see any scenario where pricing could come down, especially given all of the coming new housing being built in Sequim? And what about Port Angeles? Without any building going on, increasing supply, do you expect Port Angeles pricing to continue to rise?
Yeah. So I'll answer regarding Sequim. Jim, you can take Port Angeles, of course. So first, the question before, there was somebody asked what was the definition of the Sequim area in terms of geographically for our data, and that is we in our MLS we've got an area 300, and that basically takes all of the city of Sequim as well as Sequim proper. It actually goes a little outside of that as well. So to the east it goes Diamond Point and Gardner to the Jefferson County line, and then to the west it goes to Blue Mountain Road and Lewis Road on the north side of 101. So that actually, those areas in Agnew have a Port Angeles address, but those are included in the Area 300. So,
and Michael, isn't that
yeah,
the Sequim school district boundaries, or is that changed?
It is. That's what it is. Yep. So, so to answer the question, Stephen, yeah, we've got a couple hundred homes coming our way in a couple different developments. And I can only say personally that I'm happy about it. We had a couple developments come in the last few years that ended up being 55 and over homes where the owner doesn't own the land underneath them. This is better. This is fee simple. This is where people actually are going to be owning the home. It's interesting. This is just a side note that I notice a lot of the same people that are saying, hey, we need better services around here. Restaurants aren't open as many days as I want. I can't get the doctor that I want. There's not enough people working. A lot of those same folks that I know are often saying, I can't believe we're allowing this development. How is this happening? How can you, this is greed and we don't have the water, these type of things. You can't have it both ways. You either, want there to be jobs and you want prices to come down and relax. It's a supply and demand issue. And if we don't allow new development prices, it's going to just put an upward pressure on prices. So to answer the question about where do I think prices are going, this is, we're talking about less than 1,000 homes being built. In fact, probably, I think way less. I think we're talking about 600 something. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And in a town of 30,000, I just don't know that that's going to move the needle that much in terms of our pricing. So I think there's a broader question, maybe nationally or even internationally in terms of housing prices and what will happen. And I think that SQUIM will go along with that. Jim, speak to Port Angeles, would you?
Well, why don't I go into my slides and I can put a little bit more meat on the discussion here, because I do address some of those points here in respect to the difference in the two markets. So we fair with that?
Sure, great. Hey,
Okay.
so Rebecca has a question. Maybe Michael could answer for SQUIM. How many buyers are from outside of the area? Do you have any idea about?
I'll have that in just a second, Colleen.
Perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
So on my slides, I'm going to throw out some additional information. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mortgage rate trends, the residential retail market. So I'm going to talk about 9836263, which is still within our MLS. A little bit about this purchasing power that we've been talking about, and also the commercial markets, and then some summary points. But just as for information, so typically Port Angeles is an older housing stock supply. It's probably a more varied housing stock supply. But typically that market that Michael was talking about is about 2/3 of the supply, 2/3 of the sale of all real estate transactions and real estate supply in our area is in that SQUIM market. And I want you to keep in mind that 569 number that he has for the average sale of a home in that area. This is just a reflection of past interest rates. This is the 30-year mortgage rate since 71. And the average during that period of time is 7 3/4. So we are still right at or slightly below what has been the 30-year average. But what we've seen is this 13-year period of time of less than 5% mortgage rate interest, which has fueled a lot of buying power. Again, lower payments, and particularly someone that is, let's say, somebody that's 33 years old and has been in the in the real estate market buying a home, or that's what they've lived with for that period of time. So that has a big impact on purchasing power and buying. This slide just shows sort of the correlation between that 30-year mortgage rate and also the inflation rate. And you can see that the direct correlation when inflation skyrocketed up to 9.1%, interest rates are falling. But the good sign here is that whoops, what happened? Uh-oh. Did I lose you?
Oh, we see a different screen.
I know. You're looking at Paragon.
Yeah.
I had this happen once before. My PowerPoint, for some reason, crashed. Hang on. Hang on.
Can't miss this opportunity, but that would be a Mac.
Hey, Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Uh, we're back at it. So again, we're
Well-
back down to this 3%
Not,
inflation.
okay,
Pardon me?
we're good.
We're good?
Yeah,
Okay, so hopefully that's going to see a decline in interest rates following that that trend. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about 98362. So this is Tumwater truck route to McDonald Creek, basically. This is sort of the indicators. It is a seller's market. And you keep in mind that I want you to sort of track a couple of these numbers here. So this is trailing 12-month data for your information. The next slide is going to be similar, but we've got 2.5 months of inventory. It's gone up dramatically in this area versus the other areas. Prices are a little bit over list price. And keep in mind, we're 433 here versus what Mike was talking about at 569. So the SQM market is much more expensive than the Port Angeles market. This is, for comparison, this is 98362. This is 98363, even more of a seller's market, primarily less supply, lots of demand. So we have less inventory, has gone down dramatically in the last 12 months. Prices are selling at about what the list price is. Price slightly higher in the 98363, with again only 9 days on the market. We were 7 days on the market, and that's gone down over the last 12 months. This is median home prices in the 98362 area. So the blue is the 98362 number. This is Clallam County. This is the state. So we've seen about a 15% increase in prices since June of 21. So basically in the last 3 years, prices continue to increase, and because of demand in the market. So inventory supply, I found this rather interesting. So this is the 98362 area. So the average is about 1.5 months of inventory. We're now up at almost 3 months of inventory. So there's quite a bit more inventory in the 98362 area. Then if we look at the 98363 number, I mean, it was dramatic to see the difference in how these two areas are different. But we're under 1 month supply, quite a bit below, but there's been a dramatic change. And whether that's, I think it's just less inventory out in that area. So I put this slide together about sort of looking at what is the issue. And you were just talking a little bit about this, and to me, there's an economic imbalance that goes on that we have to recognize. And this is somewhat of an economic development issue, an economic development topic. But as we were just talking, median household income is about $66,000 a year. You know, your buying power, as we were just saying, is about $1,600 to $1,700 a month, whether you're renting or you're buying a home. That's what your purchasing power is. But at the same time, and I'm only looking here at this 433,000. So I took the lower end of the housing homes on the market at a 20% down at 7.5% 30-year mortgage. That's going to cost you $2,300 a month or $2,400 a month versus our average median household income. And again, household income is all income coming into that home, not just at one wage. So we have this imbalance. And just to show the difference from when we were talking about a much lower interest rate, if we were back to 3%, you know, all of a sudden our income level becomes affordable at that level, and we would even see more buying power. But we have this economic imbalance in Clallam County primarily due to our median household income is much lower here. So, for example, our median household income is about 73% of the state average, and we rank about 32nd out of 44 counties in median household income. So that's a challenge, and it's a driving force behind this affordability question. Back to your question of location of buyers. So this blue is if a buyer was, and I decided to include Port Angeles and Sequim. So if there was a buyer purchasing, and this again is from Olympic Peninsula Title throughout the whole area. If they were from Port Angeles and Sequim, this is about 55%. This is about 51. And so far in 2024, we're at about 59% of the buyers are from the Port Angeles Sequim area. So it's pretty much pretty close to a 50-50 split between outside buyers versus people that live in Port Angeles and Sequim. The purchasing method, again, Michael just talked about this. So we're at about 43%, and cash buyers are going down. It was higher as Michael was saying. 2024, we're at about 27% are cash buyers, and the rest are financed buyers. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on in the commercial market in Port Angeles. I've been lucky to be involved in a number of these recently. We're averaging about 11 sales a year in commercial real estate. These are the average prices, or the median price. It has gone up dramatically, primarily because there's a lot of influence depending on what sells, right? Because you're not talking about a big number. We've got 11 of them. You can tell that days on market versus what Michael talked about in Sequim, and even around 10 days in this market, commercial properties are on the market a dramatically longer period of time. And what I've seen is the price per square foot, and we'll get into this in just a second, is very low compared to what it costs to replace any of these commercial buildings. So the average is about $175 a foot. And just for example, there's only been 22%, or about 1/5 of the commercial sales in the Port Angeles area during this period of time were over $200 a square foot. Okay, so just keep that in mind just as I go to this next slide. So if you were to build commercial real estate, these are the kind of prices that you're looking at. If just a single story retail or office, is anywhere $350 to $400, not dissimilar to what homes are. If you want to build hotels, they're quite a bit more. Boy, if you get into medical office buildings or that kind of thing, you could be, well over 500, even up to 1,000 a square foot. So from an investor standpoint in commercial real estate, if you want anywhere from a 6 to 8% return, which is pretty tight if you're financing it, a rate of return is going to have to be in the $250 to $3 a square foot per month, and that's not even counting the land cost involved of building commercial real estate. So when we look at the Port Angeles market, currently office retail is anywhere from about $1.25 to $1.40 a square foot per month. The East Side Safeway Mall is there. There's a couple of empty spaces there. They're at about $1.97. New construction is coming up at about $350 a foot. Again, back to what I showed in the left part of that slide. But there appears to be a fairly reasonable opportunity here for investment, and I'll get into this, is, you know, for a 6 to 8% return if you're going to buy a property for 175 a foot, you're looking at rental rates, return on rental rates. And again, assuming triple net lease, anywhere from 87 to $1.16 per month, which is, you know, below market. So there's opportunities, and we've seen this occurring over the last, particularly the last year. There's been an uptick in some of the sales of these commercial properties in Port Angeles, which is nice to see. But I just wanted to end with a couple of thought-provoking statements to start discussion. One of the things that concerns me for our area, and this goes back to the average household income issue, is the projections that the Department of Commerce is making, that they're saying that we have a need of 5,847 homes by 2024, and that 70%.
2044.
2044, what did I say?
2024.
2044, that 70% of those homes are the demands coming from people that are less than 50% of AMI, which is 33,000 a year currently, which has a purchasing power of about $825 a month. And that, you know, that what Timothy was talking about, 120% of AMI is just around 800 homes. Well, this demand ratio, and again, this is driven by income levels based upon cost of construction and return on investment, is just unsustainable for our economy and the communities. And that economic growth and increasing this regional's average household income needs to be our top priority. We've got to grow this economic purchasing power because we can't influence that. And there is this imbalance, right? And what I'm suggesting is that people need to be able to grow employment above the average wage, but also move people up the employment ladder so they get more earning power. Commercial real estate to me looks like a good value and investment if there is a viable use. And in Port Angeles, particularly, some of these larger buildings, it's really tough to find a viable use, because especially when they're, you know, 16,000 square feet, it's really tough. But if there's a viable use, if you're a business owner that's renting now, you know, if you can find a building, I think it's a good investment. And my last point is that I have noticed a great number of sole proprietor that are home-based business or remote workers that I believe are an economic driver for us. They are earning way above our income level. I think this influences household income more than it is per capita income or wages, because many of them are reporting outside of Port Angeles, but their income is reflected here. Is a way to grow this average household income over the entire county, is by looking at many of those people as an economic driver, and also, you know, what kind of homes and areas are they interested in living. So just some thought-provoking points for discussion. And Colleen, I'll move it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate your presentations, both of you. One thing I've been thinking about, the Natural Resources Innovation Center has hired Roy Street Group and Dialogue Design, which are two firms that operate out of Seattle and the British Columbia area. And what they've been seeing as the biggest driver in Seattle that's driving the real estate market, the number of sales and that kind of thing, is ADU condoization, which I'm wondering if we're going to see any of that. Examples are, if there's an older home with a large backyard, because of the new House Bill, I think it's 1337, and that allows for accessory dwelling units, ADUs. They're saying older homes that have large backyards selling, initially they just started selling like crazy, and now they're selling for over $1 million because of the value of the land, where a developer, one example was, I can't remember how large the lot was, but it was a good sized lot, maybe a 1/4 acre. And they bought it, it was a home built in 1960. They bought it for $720,000. And then they put $300,000 or so into the main house, and then sold that for 1.2, you know, typical that you'd see someone renovating a place and making a profit. And then in the backyard or on the side yard or wherever, they built an accessory dwelling unit, 1,000 square feet, and sell that for $825,000. And so making over $500,000 in profit in the project. And so now, granted, we don't have those level of prices that people can pay because we don't have the median income here that is in Seattle, but there's certainly the demand for housing. And the other problem is the cost to build in Clallam County is pretty similar to the cost to build in Seattle. But I am wondering if you're starting to see these folks that are looking at ADU condos where they just sell off the home. They have all the, you know, easements and everything to it. They take care of the yard, that kind of thing, but they are tied to the owner of the primary residence. Have you seen that here in Port Angeles and Sequim?
I have not seen it in Port Angeles, and I know Sean Washburn and some other agents are on, but I have not seen that yet. I mean, I know I compliment Port Angeles in their effort to initiate some higher density development, all that. We're seeing a few of them. I think there's been 5 ADU permits this year. It hasn't taken off as I think it would have planned. We're still early in that period of time to see whether there's investment, but there's a couple that are going on that I would say dramatically change the nature of a neighborhood when that happens, particularly what size that ADU is or that other unit being put on the house. But I have not seen that yet.
Michael or Tim, anyone else? Are you seeing that?
No, we really haven't. Well, first of all, Clallam County is fortunate. When we were down lobbying to our legislators in Olympia this last year, and earlier this year, we were fortunate in Clallam County that a lot of the rural counties actually don't have what we have already, which is the allowance for ADUs here in Clallam County. There are 3 criteria that you need to meet in order to have an ADU in Clallam County. You need, which I wish were different because we need more. One is you need at least 1.5 acres in Clallam County. So this is not in Port Angeles City or in the city of Sequim, but in the county, you need at least 1.5 acres. And I would love to see that lowered to an acre at least, because there are so many 1 acre or 1.25 acre parcels, especially in the Dungeness Valley and in Sequim. But that is criteria 1. Number 2, the ADU cannot be any greater than 1,200 square feet. Could be 1,250. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Sean, or anybody. And then it cannot be any greater than 50% the size of the main home. So right. Those are the 3 criteria for building an ADU in the county. And we're actually fortunate because most rural counties in the state don't allow for that. So that is one of the tools that's out there. Yeah.
Michael, Bruce is on, I believe, and we've talked about this very issue. Bruce, can you speak to that? think you're on. Bruce Emery, he was on. I guess he had to jump off. So what he has shared is that they were looking at, or maybe Randy can, I saw he was on as well, that the county was looking at lowering it from 1.5 to 1.25 acres at one point, but because of the Growth Management Act and the rules there, they would be subject to a lawsuit from FutureWise, and that it's not allowed under, or maybe Tim, can you speak to it? It's not allowed under the GMA.
Not currently. And like say that if you start trying to adjust things, then you open a door for FutureWise to come in. And they're kind of one of the last people you really want to battle with. But Michael was correct in what his assessment for current ADUs are within the county, that, 50% up to, I believe, 12 or 1250. And that, that you do run that sort of thing. Plus the other thing that, when you start getting into it, I think, a lot of people will attest that Washington's landlord-tenant laws really keep a lot of people from getting into that market. That, if you sit and you go to planning commissions and you hear, and like, yeah, Jim's, that if you hear what they're saying, they're going, we don't want to do this because you don't want to get a long-term tenant in there that you can't get out. And so
I was just going to refer to Tim. I think that's a great point. The assumption with ADUs in most cases is that you're going to assume to become a long-term tenant landlord. And most people aren't, if they haven't experienced that, that's a stretch, right? To take on that if you haven't done it. And even many people that have done it are reluctant now because of the change in the laws. So that's just the environment in which we're working in, and I think is putting a lot of pressure against that kind of development to happen because of that.
Well, that's why ADU condoization allows someone to sell the property, and now it's a homeowner.
Sorry,
looking at that potential, Sean.
I just want to clarify one exception to the 1.5 acre rule is if it's on PUD water, you don't have to have the 1.5 acre. That's only if it's on an individual well. And that was, Colleen, you were with me in Bruce's office and we verified that. So if you have a 1 acre parcel, you can do an ADU as long as you're on a water source other than a well. Maybe a community well. I didn't verify that, but definitely PUD water, that's an exception to the 1.5 acre rule.
So I'm going to try to ask some of the questions in the chat. Paul says, can someone speak to the economics of building rental apartment complexes in Port Angeles and Sequim and the return on investment? What are the variables that limit such investments? So from the developers I talked to, and in 2019, I met with 8 different apartment complex developers, because we were part of the Emerald Coast Opportunity Zone that gave them the opportunity to defer capital gains taxes and that kind of thing. So I really thought this was a new tool that might entice them to come to our area. And we also, in the city of Port Angeles, have the multifamily tax exemption, which means that developers don't have to pay any property taxes on the increased value of the real estate once it's built for a period of 8 to 12 years, depending on how many affordable units they build. So that really, those 2 tools, and John Ralston knows very well about both of these. And what we were finding over and over is that those developers look at a couple things. One is, what are your median wages doing? And if they are increasing, then they feel that they'll be able to increase rents on an annual basis, which is a requirement for the investors that have a certain return on investment that they expect to have for an investment. And ours were flat compared to other areas of the state. And the other thing, when I talked about, we have these great tools, multifamily tax exemption, and then this Emerald Coast Opportunity Zone tool, they said, well, you know, we don't know the subs there, subcontractors. We don't know the permitting processes or the people, and how easy will that be? How long does it take to get a permit? Because time is money. And we know the demand is here where we're located, and we would have to mobilize if we went there. All these different reasons for why they wouldn't. I was 0 for 8, not a good batting average, trying to pitch to them on different properties that were available for sale, that were high density zoned, available for apartments. And, you know, you think about it, you've got a huge investment up front if you're going to create an apartment, and you get very little income relative to your investment each year. Whereas if you sold them as a condo, you get your investment back and could go do another product somewhere else. If you were able to sell the whole thing. So you're really tying up a lot of your capital into a project for a long time. And that is a business model that a lot of entities have, but they have certain metrics that they expect to achieve. And we just can't meet those with our median income here. And so to me, this goes back to, we have been,
This
you know,
is
seeing
good
retirees.
program this morning.
There we go. We have been seeing retirees move to our community. We have remote workers that are coming to our community because of the relatively lower price points. And we've been seeing a growth of recreational industry and tourism, but those different industries pay the entrepreneurs well, but they don't pay employees well. They're seasonal, and they're by and large minimum wage jobs. And so that has created a hollowing out of our economy, and it reverberates and in so many different ways, where it ends up our greatest export is our kids. And that's something that the Clallam EDC is really, laser focused on, trying to create jobs for the people that live here so that they can afford to have a quality of life and be able to prosper. But enough about that. Sorry, I went off onto my speechifying there. So I see, Stephen, you asked, Jim, we are swimming in vacant and relatively cheap commercial real estate. Is any developer willing to invest in converting these sites to multifamily apartments, duplexes, their townhomes? This repurposing of excess commercial to residential seems like we could fix two problems at the same time. Is this even doable? And I watched an expert on a presentation in Olympia on this. And I'd love to share mine, but I know the question, my input, but I know the question is directed to you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the nature of the building. There is one going on 8th Street right now that I know of, that is remodeling and retrofitting the building into more of a dormitory kind of housing style. And so I think it's doable. But again, a lot of it has to do with the characteristics of the building, number one, and then because you're moving from a commercial use to a residential use, you run into all kinds of ingress, egress, safety, fire suppression. There's lots of other things that then you have to deal with. So it's a building by building determination of the feasibility to do that.
So I sat through a presentation by a developer that all he does is converts commercial office buildings to residential. And one of his things was that you do not look at buildings built prior to 1996 because of the energy code requirements. If it's built before 1996, it doesn't pencil. They did things differently. And so that was rule number one. And then it was like Jim was saying, is the size of the building. and where is, you need at least X many stories, and where is the elevator shaft located? So there's all these, and there are some pretty quick rules of thumb, like that built prior to 1996, don't consider it, that if you can meet those, then you should look at it and potentially consider that. But it really limits the buildings that could be converted. So Tim, I see you have your hand up, and we got 3 minutes left.
Okay, because I had a quick question for Michael and Jim. Michael, when you're looking at SQUIM, are you seeing, you talked about your median prices. Are you seeing an escalator ability in SQUIM for people that, that they can, when they're looking to move up, can they move up, or are they still kind of locked into their price of their house over what they got, their low interest rate and everything? They don't have enough equity to really make that move up to a next step. And maybe Jim and Sean can say for PA.
I'll speak to SQUIM, and that is, the short answer is yes, but that's because we kind of have an unusual economy in that there's lots of wealth in SQUIM. It wasn't made here, so it's not economic dependent. It is, they brought their wealth here. Do they come and decide that they want to get a better house, better view, newer, whatever? Yes, and a lot of them have the ability to do that. But this is, these are not normal working people either. These are retirees who have wealth, and they made that wealth somewhere else.
Timothy, I've had a few clients, and Sean can comment on this also, that are moving up. Young couples, young families that, if they see a house that maybe, is a step up for them. Maybe it's a little bit bigger, has a better view, maybe a little bit newer. Yeah, I've had 3 recently that basically sold and bought in Port Angeles to improve their their quality of life and living standards.
Okay, so they're opening a lower level of housing in.
Oh yeah. I've had it.
I think Michael Senior's talking.
Yeah, but he's on.
Unmuted.
Colleen's on mute.
Dad, you're on mute. Mike McAleer, you're on mute.
Yep, I say that to some degree, that is offset by the number of folks over here in SQUIM that are retired, getting older, and downsizing.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree. It's going both ways.
Both directions.
Pat just had a
like
comment there. Yeah.
I'd like to add that on July 17th, Mitch Royman, Director Roy Street Group, will be on, but he has done an ADU study, which looks at this information about ADU condos and the viability of it, how to finance it. It's a lot of really great information. We're looking specifically at, can we potentially build a manufacturing plant here, and what would that take? So anyway, would want you to highlight that for your calendar if you're interested in real estate and solutions for our housing crisis. I think there's going to be some really interesting information that comes out on July 17th. So with that, it's 9:01, and I think we should call it a morning. I offer my really sincere thanks. Both Jim Haguewood and Michael McAleer are members of the EDC, and we really appreciate their membership and like to provide our members with opportunities like this to be able to share their expertise. And so it's such an important, probably the most important thing we're dealing with today is how to solve the housing crisis for our communities. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us and for our presenters today. Enjoy your morning.
Thanks, Colleen.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you.
Mhm.